And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. George, I am so excited to utter these words. It's finally game week. We have made it, George. A chaotic offseason, new head coach, new quarterback, running back holdout, training camp, everything, George, has finally, now we can put in the rearview mirror, and we finally have the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a game on Sunday. We have made it, baby. We have made it.
It's hard to believe, but yeah, it's finally game week. No more, for at least 4 weeks, no more contract talks, no more trade discussions, just football for at least 4 weeks, just football.
Why would you say that? With our track record of predicting things, like this Saturday, there's going to be some sort of his agent tweeting something, JT looking, to make a statement and finally talking for the first time. Like, now, just because you put it out there, that we're going to have a month of most likely quiet, drama-less football. You jinxed it.
I probably did. Although if it means JT talks, I'm okay with it. I'll take that bullet if it means JT talks. But the rest of it, yeah. If I never see another social media food fight, I'm okay with that.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Please, no more tweeting with the owner and agents and players. Just worry about the game on the field. That is my hope going forward here. But this pod is very exciting, George, because it is game week. We have a full season preview. And if you're listening right now on Tuesday, this is one of the normal days for our recording schedule. In season, now we are finally here, which means our in-season recording schedule will be as follows. Tuesday will be kind of a recap still, maybe slight look ahead to the week going forward here. Thursday is going to be our big preview pod. We'll go Behind Enemy Lines Season 2, backed by popular demand, will return. Kind of give you an inside look at the Colts opponent that week. And then Sunday after the game, an instant reaction recap, hopefully more positive than last year. The good news, George, I'm going to jinx it myself here, so shame on me. I'm going to go on a limb and say this season will not be as depressing as last year. I don't think we'll have as many depressing, shocking post-game pods as we did last year. Some of these blown losses, some of these gut-wrenching ways the Colts found to lose, historical 33-0 losses falling flat, in prime time. I'm going to say maybe they won't win more, but more optimistically focused post-game pods we had last year.
I'll go with it won't be as depressing because, the has always been managed expectations. So it's, I don't think coming in, you're not looking at this as a playoff team. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But, I think last year that was part of it. You're thinking, okay, Matt Ryan's the missing piece. They're going to get consistency at quarterback. They're going to go and make the playoffs and, be a factor in a tough AFC. I don't think those are the expectations this year. So I think that helps. In sort of the disappointment factor here. And I do think it leads to more optimism. It's easier when you manage your expectations, it's easier to watch for the good, I guess for lack of a better word, to see where there's growth and to celebrate that. And I think that's what this season's going to be about.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope we're talking about Anthony Richardson dazzling even in a loss. Something to hold on to going forward here to make you feel better than some of these losses that they faced last year, where there was nothing good to take away whatsoever. All right, so big season preview coming here. We got 10 questions, George, that we'll kind of talk about to dissect and break down our predictions for this upcoming 2023 season. Let's start with managing expectations right away. Vegas has set the over-under record for the Colts, or over-number win total, I should say, at 6.5. 6.5, George. You taking the over on that? Taking the under, Colts win total 2023.
I'm going under. 4 is what's stuck in my head. I don't know if that's just because last year's just still burned in my memory, and so that's just going to stay there eternally. But I look at defensively, you lost some real leaders. Stephon Gilmore's gone, Rodney McLeod's gone. They were guys, loud voices in this locker room overall, but especially in the defense secondary that's really young now. And then offensively, you just don't know what you're going to get. It's a young group. You've got a rookie quarterback. Even the Colts are saying that there's going to be ups and downs. So I'm going to go with 4 wins, which with my prediction record means, congratulations, they're going back to the playoffs.
10-7, Andrew Luck, turnaround 2.0 here with Anthony Richardson, and this team's winning the AFC South. I am with you. I'm taking the under as well. The number that jumps out to me is 5-12, where I do think that, like, you look at the schedule, George, like, it's a tough start, right? You have obviously Jacksonville at home, a team that's given the Colts fit even when they stink. But now all of a sudden, now that's the reigning AFC South champs. They got better with Calvin Ridley. We believe, Trevor Lawrence is due to have a big jump here in, we'll say, year number 2, because I think his rookie year, what Urban doesn't even count. So we're just going to pretend that didn't exist in 2021. But it's one of those where that team should be a true, on the path to being a Super Bowl contender. So that's obviously a brutal start to that. And you have the Ravens on the road week number 3. But after that, George, like, it does open up the schedule where there's really, outside of the Jaguars, which has been the house of horrors when you go there October 15th, which, again, they're not going to win no matter who's playing, no matter how good the Colts are, no matter how bad the Jaguars are, they can't win in Jacksonville. Other than that, at Cincinnati week 14, which usually in December, that's when the Bengals, we've seen play their best football. Outside of those 4 games, so the Jaguars twice, at the Ravens, and at the Bengals, there's not another game you look at the schedule where it's like guaranteed loss. This team, no chance they win, which is why I think that they'll win a game or 2. Probably they shouldn't. I'm going to give you one upset pick here. One upset pick, because I feel like we've seen in recent years, when you have a young team, especially a rookie quarterback, there's always one game where they put it together and they win a game you think they have no chance to. I'm high in the Browns this year. I think the Browns are going back to the playoffs. I think Deshaun Watson's going to kind of regain his Pro Bowl form he had in Houston this year in Cleveland, a lot of talent around him. I think, though, the Colts win that game. So is that week 7? Week 7, October 22nd at home. Should not win that game against what is, I think, a playoff team in Cleveland. That, to me, is one of those games right home where I think a lot comes together offensively, defensively. The Colts play really good, and they win that game. And I'm conflicted in saying that, George, because on one hand, obviously, be a great win and kind of hopefully progress going from there. That's also the Indiana Knights game. I hate those uniforms. The last thing I want is now Jim Irsay to look at that and say, these are the good luck charms, and bring these uniforms back more than they should. That's my only concern with picking that upset win, is now we'll see more of these ugly, heinous uniforms coming through because the Colts won a big game in them.
We're going to play every home game in the Indiana Knights after that. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting year, I think, top to bottom. I do think it's funny that you play 2 games against playoff teams from a year ago in the first 3 weeks, and then you play 2 games against playoff teams from a year ago in the last 14 weeks, which is just a really weird setup, but that's the way it goes. I also think the Jacksonville road game should be scheduled around Halloween every year. I mean, just lean into it. Just put Colts at Jaguars every year in that Halloween window, because it's going to be a horror show, and, just play it up. Just lean into it.
And the fans wearing clown masks at the stadium, it would kind of be fitting. It would fit, it's not abnormal whatsoever.
It all fits together. But that's in a lot of ways, it's funny because I don't think there's many teams in the league that would say this, but I think it's true here. Opening with Jacksonville is probably the worst thing that could happen to a rookie quarterback here, just because the matchup, we'll get into that on Thursday, the matchup year in, year out just never seems to work out. And now, here comes the Jaguars fired up, trying to prove that they are Super Bowl contenders. Kind of a tough catch for Richardson. But like I said, after that, there's a lot of open spaces. I mean, week 2 in Houston seems like a coin toss. Most of those games after the Baltimore game, there's a few there'll be more heavy underdogs in than others. But I don't, like you said, I don't think there's one game after, other than the Jacksonville road game and the Cincinnati road game after Baltimore, that you really feel like it's going to take a Herculean effort to win that game. I mean, things are going to have to go right, obviously. They're going to have to play well. I mean, all those things that are normal, but it is not a murderer's row schedule this year. And I think that's good. And you mentioned this before we got on the pod, so I want to give you credit for it. Maybe it's a situation where Anthony Richardson gets in some late game situations, learns, I think you learn a lot from those. Tight fourth quarters, I think, are probably the best thing for young quarterbacks to experience.
I 100% agree. And like we've talked about a ton, right, leading into this specific season preview podcast, that wins don't matter. So you're saying 4-13. I'm saying 5-12. We're both in the same ballpark. Under 6.5 is both our prediction. And it's like, even if they lose a lot of these close games, but you're able, like you said, if Richardson with this schedule, and again, we said 4 out of the 17 games probably should lose, and you're playing against playoff teams where they're just clearly better than you. So 13 out of 17 games, in theory, you should be in and be within one score for most of the game. So if you even get half of those, George, where Richardson or the defense, because that's still a young defense, especially in the secondary, where it's down by 7, hey, 2 minutes, the ball's in your hands, you get 6 out of 13 opportunities, either offensively or defensively, to make a play to win the game, George. Like you said, that's all you can ask for. You win one, even if you lose more than you win, just getting in that situation, almost being comfortable, being uncomfortable late in games kind of teaches you and forces you how to win, hopefully. I think that's the best thing you can ask for this team. We kind of talked about it, what about, say, a month or so ago? Like, the wins and losses don't matter, but I think what does matter, George, is how competitive this team is. Can they fight? Can they be in these games? Again, like you mentioned, the 13 out of the 17 opponents, maybe some of them are better than the Colts, but it's not head and shoulders. You're not going to the game saying no chance they can win this game. So if you're fighting, if you're competitive, if you are at least making it tough, even in losses, but you're putting your best effort out there and making the other team makes, hell of a play to win the game, I think that's what, honestly, the expectation should be. That's what you can ask for. And like I said, that's, I think, the best way with such a young team, the youngest team in the roster in the NFL, I should say, with not one player over 30 years old. That's the best way to kind of teach you how to win and now kind of be seasoned going forward in 2024 and 2025, where you can kind of get some momentum going to that year, even if the win total, again, is nowhere near, let's say, playoff contender after the season.
Yeah, well, and I think the one word I've heard the most from Shane Steichen all year long, but really especially, in the past week or so as seasons come in, is compete. I mean, it's exactly what he's saying. He wants them to go out there and compete. And I think they have a chance to do that. Because as you said, compete doesn't necessarily mean win, not right off the bat. I think compete means that's how you learn to win, and it eventually leads to winning. But, early on, it is, I say this all the time, my wife coaches middle school volleyball, and I always try to, in that regard, make the other team earn those 25 points. Don't give them 25. You may lose, but let them know you were there. And I think that's the Colts this year. Any win that the other team gets, you want them walking away going, man, next year that might not be so much fun to play this team. That's the feeling you want left behind every week this season.
100%. I could not agree more, George. Like I said, even if the scoreboard reflects losses more than wins, it's still, I know every coach is going to say it. I get it. They don't believe in moral victory. It doesn't exist. But truly, George, that is where the moral victory, and that's where the true optimism you hope from the season can come. If the record does not reflect what you want, it's just like, this team was tough, this team was scrappy. And again, the older you get, the more you see, the better you can become, right? So if Anthony Richardson's able to kind of see all aspects of the game, late game situations come through in a few of them, the defense maybe in the secondary that's very young gets a stop, or the defensive line, which is, we'll get to them in a second here, makes a big time sack late in the game to win a game. That's really what you can ask for going here into the season, just to have some of those moments that show, hey, we can do it. We have the potential where we can absolutely do it. Now it's just about learning and getting better. And that's, like I said, that's really where this season is going to be deemed a success or not this season. Speaking of which, George, so we both are taking the under on Vegas's number of 6.5 wins for the Colts this season. Here's a question for you. In the AFC South, where the Texans are basically in the same spot as the Colts, Jaguars are the reigning champs, and the Titans are in a very, very weird state right now where they're still going forward, where they have Derrick Henry. They signed DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason, but they drafted Will Levis. Ryan Tannehill's not very good. Their direction is very weird. Will the Colts finish in last place in the AFC South? Something they have not done since the infamous 2011 season when Peyton got hurt and they tanked for Andrew Luck. So you've not seen it since 2011. Will this be the first year since then they finished in last place?
That's a really hard one, because I really think you got Jacksonville in first, and then you can almost put the other 3 teams in a bag and pull out a name and have as good a chance of finishing second, third, and fourth that way as any other method you want to pick them with. Tennessee, like you said, to me, they might be the hardest team to peg in the NFL this year. They could be a playoff team, and they could be a problem for people, and they could be picking in the top 5, and I don't think either outcome would stun me. You know, really, a lot of it comes down to Ryan Tannehill have anything left in the tank, and that defense, can it hold together? Because I think when they were really good, their defense was outperforming expectations. Now we'll see. They've got players over there, and they still got Kevin Byard. They still got Jeffrey Simmons. They've got guys that can really wreck games on that side of the ball. But will it all come together as a whole? Mike Vrabel's a pretty good coach. They've got more talent than the Colts and tight Texans do on paper. So I'll probably pick Tennessee second based on those factors. But there's very low confidence in that pick. The Colts and the Texans is, man, you get 2 first-year coaches, you get 2 rookie quarterbacks, you get 2 teams that were very bad a year ago. I don't know that one of them really stepped forward than the other this offseason, where you look at the 2 off seasons and you say one of them had a really significantly better offseason than the other. I will go with Houston because they brought in a defensive head coach, which I think this year helps them a little more. When you have a rookie quarterback, he's probably going to do more things to try to be conservative and, you know, put them in positions to not lose games, maybe not to win them, but to not lose games. And I think maybe that leads to them, you know, I'm picking the Colts to win 4, maybe Houston wins 5, you know, that it's going to be that tight of a battle, or maybe Houston's 4-12-1 and the Colts are 4-13. You know, it's going to be a really, really, really tight race there, I think. And the only question in my mind is Tennessee there to make it a 3-way, race, or is Tennessee more pushing Jacksonville?
I'm going to say Tennessee's like in that 8 to 9 win range. Honestly, mostly, George, because of Mike Vrabel. You mentioned, like, he is, I would argue, maybe the coach who does more with less, better than any coach in the NFL. Like, he has been able, you look at some of the names on the roster, it's like, how is he winning and in the playoffs, you know, for the most part consistently? And last year they were 7-3 before they just collapsed and lost every game. So I'll say they are not a playoff team, but I would say there's a wide gap between, let's say, where the Colts and Texans are and where the Titans are. So I think it'll be a 2-team race to the bottom here. I will say the Colts finished 3rd, Texans 4th. Close to where I'm with you, like, to 1 or 2 game separation. But I like the Colts playmakers on defense better. I think they're more experienced. And like, I don't think CJ Stroud's gonna have a good rookie year, in large part not because of him, because what's around him. I got questions about that O-line. First time OC coming on in. And the weapons, like Dameon Pierce had a good rookie year, the running back, but it's like, I mean, their most experienced and right now most proven receivers, Robert Woods. He's in the back nine of his career. Like, I like Michael Pittman Jr. better, like Alec Pierce better for Anthony Richardson. So I think Richardson, even though he's more raw as a quarterback, I think is a better situation right now for his success in year number 1 compared to what the Texans have. And I don't think there's a lot of talent defensively that's going to get a lot of stops. Again, it's going to be close. It's not like the Colts are head and shoulders above the Texans. We saw that last year with the roster. We thought it was going to be a playoff team in Indy, be way closer to Houston than it should have been, not winning a game against them last year. But I will go Texans still, though, finishing in the basement, and the Colts avoiding last place finish here in the AFC South. As Lee Corso would say, closer than the experts think, even though I think a lot of the experts are kind of projecting close race for the bottom there. All right, we talked about Anthony Richardson. Let's dive into some projections here, George. Number 1, last year, a number that gets thrown around a ton with him at Florida, not 13 starts, 53.8. That was his completion percentage in 13 starts or 12 starts last year at Florida. Over or under? I'll go first here. I'm going to say over. So I think Shane Steichen in year number 1 is really going to create an offense that's easy for Richardson. I think he's going to create a lot of easy throws, put him in positions where either receivers can make plays, they're in good leverage spots, and Richardson can read the defense sooner and have some layup throws. I think that's honestly what year 1 is going to be a lot about for Shane Steichen, is just putting Richardson in the best position to succeed. I thought Albert Breer over the weekend had a great article kind of highlighting that. You know, he talked to Shane Steichen, he talked to Jim Bob Cooter, and kind of both of them kind of talked about their experiences with young quarterbacks, with Cooter, you know, working with Trevor Lawrence and Jalen Hurts when he was in Philly, and obviously Steichen working with Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. He kind of learned quickly what works for quarterbacks, what doesn't. How can I make my rookie quarterback's life easier? That's, I think, what's going to be Shane Steichen's kind of main motivation here in year 1. So I think it'll be a lot easier of completions, a lot easier throws for Richardson. So I'll go up on the 53.8 completion percentage from last year, George, to this year. How about yourself?
Yeah, I agree for the same reasons. I mean, I don't know, how many people checked out Florida's opener against Utah, but if you did, you get an idea of what Anthony Richardson was dealing with last year. And I think Shane Steichen's going to put Richardson in much better positions than Billy Napier did. I think he's going to, I think if you look at Florida's play calling last year, it was heavy deep balls. And I get that to an extent because that's probably the strongest part of Richardson's game right now. But when you do that, the completion percentage is going to go down. I mean, that's part of the nature of the beast. And also it's going to make you, boom or bust offense because obviously you hit those plays and I'm sure the drives that they did, the chance of scoring on that drive goes way up, but you don't 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, you don't want to do that to young quarterbacks, inexperienced quarterbacks. And I think Shane Steichen will avoid that. So I think the completion percentage will be up. Will it be 60? That's the question. I think that's the big, if he hits 60 or above, I think that's a really big number for him this year. If 58 or 59, it's good progress and you're heading in the right direction. But I definitely think you're going to see Shane Steichen give him a lot of throws to make him comfortable, especially early in games. And then take those shots, but not nearly to the extent that the Gators did a year ago.
You're right. Yeah, they put a lot on his plate. And like I said, you saw that on Thursday night with Florida, not having Anthony Richardson. It's tough sledding. It is absolutely tough sledding. All right. So both saying an improved completion percentage for Richardson in his rookie year in the NFL compared to his only year at Florida last year. How about total touchdowns, George? If I set the number at 25.5, total touchdowns running and passing, you taking the over or taking the under?
I think I'm going to go the under. I think that, red zone's kind of last thing to come for rookies most of the time. And we've seen that already with Anthony Richardson, tight windows down there, all the things you understand. I think defenses are going to be really keyed to him in the red zone as well. If I'm a defense coordinator coming into the week, one of the biggest things I'm worried about, especially without Jonathan Taylor in his first 4 weeks, is Anthony Richardson down, inside 20, because I'm going to make sure he doesn't beat me down there. So I think it's going to be tough for him. I think it's going to be tough sledding. I think as the year goes on, I think they'll get better, but, does that end up adding up to 25? It's hard to say. And then the other part of that, this is the thing one of the things I'm most interested in watching on Sunday and as the year goes on. When Frank Reich came in, he was adamant that Andrew Luck had to, take better care of himself. They were going to run, but they were going to do it in specific situations. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's going to run more than Andrew Luck. That's a no-brainer. But to what extent is Shane Steichen going to be concerned with protecting him? Is he going to give him, short yardage situations? Is he going to put him at risk down close to the goal line? Or is he going to try to use somebody like indestructible Evan Hall in those kind of roles? I think it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
I'm going to go over the 25.5 because I think, honestly, for the exact reason you talk about, I think red zone, there's not right now a actual, especially with Jonathan Taylor missing bare minimum the first 4 games. I know you had Evan Hall and Deion Jackson each score a touchdown the last preseason game against the Eagles, but I feel like Shane did not really use his offense the way he wants to in the preseason. So I think we're going to see a lot more Anthony Richardson runs in the red zone, especially this year. And you look at last year, it's 17 passing touchdowns, 9 rushing touchdowns. Florida used him a lot, kind of run the ball in the end zone. I think we'll see that. And so for me, I'll take 25.5 over. Again, I think he'll have a few more passing touchdowns, open up a little bit. I think we'll see, especially in the red zone, have him run the ball a ton. And I think they'll use him, not a battering ram, but I think use his legs again to kind of spread the defense out, in part because there's not really that running back right now you feel great about pounding in the end zone and getting 6 points. Finally is for Anthony Richardson, George. Offensive Rookie of the Year. Some big-time names, right? Obviously, 2 quarterbacks in Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud taken before him. You got Bijan Robinson. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's some nice rookies coming out here. Offensively, if I say top 3 Offensive Rookie of the Year, will Anthony Richardson finish top 3? You say yes or no?
Tough one too. So much that ends up being on team success. That's why quarterbacks don't win that award lately. It's funny because there are very few awards you talk about weighted against quarterbacks. Offensive Rookie of the Year is one that has been. You know, Justin Herbert did it with Shane Steichen as his offense coordinator, so you got to take that into account as well. But team success is so important to that. You know, people lean towards rookies that are playing on winning teams and playing big roles on winning teams. I kind of favor Jackson Smith and Jigba for that reason. I think he's going to have a big role in Seattle. I think Pete Carroll has shown that he can get young receivers involved very quickly. I think Seattle has a chance to be a playoff team again, or at least in contention for that. But then after that, that second and third spot, you know, Bryce Young's going to get a lot of consideration because the number one overall pick always does. And if he plays well, you know, that's going to help him a lot. Maybe Carolina in a weak division will have a better record than the Colts or the Texans, and that'll help his case as well. But then, you know, between Stroud and Richardson, it's sort of like what we were talking about with the teams. I kind of go with Richardson for the reason that you're going with the Colts to finish in third place in the division, that he's got the better weapons. I think his numbers are going to look better because he's going to hit a couple deep shots to Alec Pierce. He's going to have, you know, a security blanket there in Michael Pittman. So I'll say top three, but just barely.
I'm gonna say no. Say outside the top three. Like you mentioned it before, it is a anti-quarterback award for the most part, if you will, because like I said, so much of the rookies' team success, good or bad, is on how the team does play and how the record is. And plus, that's been now an award too. You see a lot more skill guys go. Bijan Robinson, I think, is gonna have a big year in Atlanta, and that could be a team that could win the division. So again, that kind of help you out there. Jalen Hyatt, a guy out of Tennessee, Biletnikoff winner last year, in a Giants offense where there's truly not a number one receiver, so he should get a lot of targets. And I'm with you. I think Bryce Young's gonna have a really good rookie year. I know there's some question about the offensive line and such, but again, I think he's in a little bit better spot than Anthony Richardson is. So I think you'll get at least 2 or 3 skill guys in the mix. Plus, I think if you're talking quarterback output right now, Bryce Young ahead of Anthony Richardson in that voting. So I'll say outside the top 3 for Richardson. I think there'll be up and downs. We'll get kind of to finish off the podcast our overall thoughts on how we'll be talking about Richardson at the end of the year. But I think at least for year number 1, offensive rookie of the year voting, I'm going to say outside of the top 3. All right, George, we made it long enough.
Bijan's a really good point. Bijan's a really, really good pick.
And you know what? I know, look, it's running back versus quarterback. They'll face off later in the season as well. That could be a big one, George. That absolutely could be a big one there for sure. Speaking of running backs, let's get into it. Jonathan Taylor. We've gone long enough, George. Let's talk about his appearance on the field first. If I say, will he be back on the field by week 6? Would you say yes or no? No could constitute he'll be on the field sooner, he'll be on the field later, or he won't be on the field at all because he's traded. Week 6 is the date, George. Are you saying he's on the field by then or no?
I'm going to say no because I think he's going to need the 3-week ramp up period out of the pup. You know, he's got 4 weeks there that he's got to sit out. And we talked about this before, but I think the big thing with pup, the difference between being on pup and not being on pup is if you're not on pup, you can come back to practice at any time. You can practice right now, even if he's ruled out for Sunday's game. As it is right now, he can't even practice with the team until I think it's October 2nd. It's the Monday of week 5. So I think he's going to need that 3-week buildup. So I think whether he stays on the roster or not, I mean, obviously if he's not on the roster, he's not going to play. It's going to be after week 6. But I think even if everything goes perfectly, if they mend every fence and everything goes great, he hasn't done anything on a football field since last December. I think it's going to be week 8 before he's out there. That's my guess. So I'm going to go over.
I'm going to say right at the target. I'm going to say week 6. Maybe I'm wrong, George. 2 weeks to me feels enough. Maybe I'm understanding it, but you have, so you practice week 5, you don't play. You practice week 6. I think you can get on the field for that game and get on the field and start playing. Like, he's not going to get on the field in week 6 and carry the ball 35 times. Right. It's one of those where it is a ramp up, but I think in his case, I think part of the ramp up could be, hey, get him 10 carries in week 6, maybe go to 15 in week 7, kind of build it up that way. But I do think at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to be missing, I don't think he's going to be on pup longer than he has to be, because at the end, it does benefit him. He needs to be on the field. He cannot play any more games. I know he's playing games now, and missing the first 4 games. But in reality, whether it's the Colts or someone else, he has to get on the field if he wants to get the contract he's looking for. Teams are going to, the more games he misses, especially after he missed 6 last year, teams are going to hold that against him. And so that number that he wants is going to continue to go down because teams can say, well, you missed 6 games in 2022, and then you were slow to get off pup, and all of a sudden now you missed another 6 or 7 games here. And now we're talking about, 13, 14 games missed in 2 years, and you're getting further and further away from 2021. I think it just benefits him to be on the field and playing and trying to get back into form as quickly as he can. So I don't think there's much room for or margin for error for him in terms of missing games. So I think he'll kind of get back on the field. And even if it is a 2-week ramp up on the field, where again, he's kind of working his way back in playing shape in the game, I still think that's part of the things he'll do. So I'll say week 6 on the field. And that leads us to our next question, George, which is also a question about his future. Who will be the leading rusher at the end of the year, George, in terms of yards for this team?
I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson because it's running back by committee. And I think they're going to split the carries up. I think there's going to be, too much of the workload shared there. And I think ultimately Richardson's going to end up, I think it's going to be a bunch of guys in that 800 to 600 range. And Richardson will be at the top of the list.
I'll say Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor will be on the team the entire year. I don't think he's going to get traded. And because, especially like I said, and Shane Steichen talking about it on Monday, where he's going to ride the hot hand and there's going to be basically a running back by committee. I do think, though, once Jonathan Taylor returns and is back into form, even if that's week 9, week 10, you have 7, 8, 9 games to go in a season, I still think he'll get a bulk of the carries and still kind of get back to his, say, 2021 form. So even though that you'll have basically 3 or 4 guys with a head start on him, including Richardson, I think at the end of the day, I think we'll still see a bulk of the carries. The second half of the season go to JT. And even if it's not 1,000 yards, I still think we'll see him be the leading rusher for this team. It's going to be close, though, George. It's going to be close because, like I said, it's a good amount of time he's missing. And you can easily have Richardson be the leading rusher, let's say, the first half of the season. Big bar for him to chase down.
It is, though, it's not a hot take because he missed 6 games last year and he was leading rusher on the team. Right. So,
and what?
We've seen him do it before.
862, right, was his, I think, final total.
Some in the neighborhood, 862, 871, something like that. It was in that neighborhood.
And half of those, some of those games he's playing with a bum ankle anyway. So if he's back healthy, even in that short amount of time, I still think it's not out of the realm possibility for him to rush for 1,000 yards.
No, not at all.
So if you are able to do that, I think that should lead you to be the leading rusher. So I'll go JT. You're going Richardson. Do you think Richardson, not Richardson, he will not be traded. Jonathan Taylor, will he be traded? Will be on the roster the whole year?
I definitely don't think Richardson will be traded.
That's a hot take.
But I don't think at this point Taylor will be traded either. I was definitely thinking that before the year, but now I think, I think they've reached a point where, and you've kind of mentioned it already, their interests have intersected. At this point, Taylor needs to get out there and he needs to play well so that he can get the contract he wants. And the Colts obviously need him on the field to help their rookie quarterback, to help this offense. So what week he's out there remains to be seen. And we talked about this on the last pod. People can go to the YouTube channel. They can go to Apple Podcasts, wherever they listen, and pick that up for more details. But, at the end of the day, it's hard to imagine that on Halloween, when the trade deadline rolls around, you're going to get offers better than you got, on cut down day when teams are getting a guy for half a year. I just don't see that taking place.
Especially if he remains steadfast in his demands of getting a new contract. If your ramp up timeline is correct, even if mine is correct, and he's back week 6, but he's getting 10 carries, you are not going to have a game before the trade deadline where you can kind of show any team, hey, I still got it. And even if he does, George, best case scenario, he has 1 game, right? Let's just say week 8, if he's even back earlier than we think and is able to carry the, 22 times in a game, go for 100 yards, you're going to have 1 game. Show teams, trade for me, give me a contract. That's realistically not enough time, and it's too risky, I think, for teams, especially that are in playoff contention, to meet those demands he's looking for in maybe one game. And there's a chance, especially if you're right in your timeline, no games. Will he be able to kind of show a team what he's got, or show a team that he's able to go back that 2021 form again this season? I'm with you. Just threading the needle. Too close, especially him starting on PUP, too close for, I think, a trade or a team, like I said, up their offer on Halloween and have a real trick or treat there offer compared to what the Colts were fielding here in late August. All right, let's go from quarterback to running back to receiver, George. Michael Pittman Jr. Will he get 1,000 yards? I'll go first on this question. I think so. I do think so, because I think at the end of the day, like I said, even though him and Richardson and Alec Pierce have had a good rapport deep, like I said, a lot of the throws I think are going to be easier for Richardson. A lot of those chain moving throws, and there's no better chain mover, no more reliable chain mover right now on this team than Michael Pittman Jr. We saw him get close last year on 99 catches. 2 years ago, he had the 1,000 yards, but that's going to be, I think, a relationship and a connection that's going to work really well and kind of develop as we go. He's a tough receiver, especially on third down, 3rd and 7. I feel like it's right in his prime window over the middle. And so even though I think they're going to spread the ball out a lot in general, where I think you'll get, 8, 9 guys between running backs, tight ends, and receivers involved in the passing game a ton this year. I don't think Pittman's going to get 99 catches like he did last year, but I do think he'll get over 1,000 yards. I think he'll make more of the receptions than he did last year, where a lot of it was underneath throws and tackle right away. So I'll say yes, George. He gets 1,000 yards. How about yourself?
I'm going to go with yes, too. You mentioned he was really close last year. That's with historically bad turnovers. I mean, they wasted so many possessions through fumbles and interceptions. And so I don't think that's going to be replicated. I don't think the offense is going to be a disaster in that area to the extent that it was a year ago. And that alone should help push him over the 1,000-yard mark. But also, we don't talk about it enough. He's in a rookie contract year, too. This is it for him. He's a free agent in March. He has about 20 million reasons to go over 1,000 yards this year. And I think he's going to make that happen.
And two, I know they've not gotten a lot of rapport in the offseason, but he, at least health-wise, has been one of the more reliable players out there in training camp a lot. Like, that's the thing, too. Like, I think, do you expect, George, this offense to spread it out a ton? Where, like, again, you are going to get on a given game 7 guys receptions. Like, is that? I think that's where I kind of envision this offense, where it's not going to be a Michael Pittman Jr. heavy scheme, but still, even with that said, he is one of the more reliable options you got on the field. Feels like that's kind of where this offense is trending towards.
Yeah, I mean, you got the 4 receivers that are on the roster right now. They're all going to see plenty of targets. I think you can get McKenzie involved. You're going to get Downs involved. You're going to get Pierce involved. I think the tight ends are going to be heavily involved in the passing game. I think that's pretty obvious to say. And the running backs are going to be pretty heavily involved. When you go back and look at Philly, they spread the ball around a lot, and they try to get the ball to playmakers in space. So I think you're going to see every eligible player, get involved throughout the season. But at the same time, none of that keeps A.J. Brown from having big numbers. None of that keeps – I think they had 2,000-yard receivers last year in Philly. So it's – I think they're going to spread the ball, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of people. And I think Pittman's still probably going to be the guy that Richardson ultimately relies on most. He's the most experienced receiver. He's got the longest track record. And, I think he's really stepped. He wasn't named one of the captains, but I think he's really stepped up his leadership this year. He's the guy that got them together in Miami for the summer. He was around the entire offseason, which hasn't always been the case. I think he's going to be a guy that Anthony Richardson leans on. Maybe not the extent that Luck did Reggie Wayne in his rookie year, but I still think he's going to be a security blanket of sorts for Richardson.
Especially if the deep ball Alec Pierce connects and is a good, that's a good weapon to have. All of a sudden now defenses, unlike last year, George, where basically they were guarding 10 yards and in the entire time and no one could break free. You now all of a sudden get a deep ball connection going with Pierce, opens up the defense, opens up the middle of the field more, which should, again, give Pittman more one-on-one opportunities and more space to work with. Well, last year was kind of working in the phone booth when you had no threat whatsoever and had one of the least explosive offenses in the league. And hopefully that should change and, again, help Pittman out going forward here. All right, so 6 questions down, George, 4 to go. Let's go on the other side of the ball here defensively. So one of the areas we were watching in training camp, right, was the corners, the outside corners, a lot of young, unproven talent out there. We know Dallas Flowers, Darrell Baker Jr. will be the two starters on the outside to start week 1 against Jacksonville. Let me ask you this question. Those two starters starting the year, will they finish the year, week 18, will they still be the starters on the outside for the Colts?
I don't think so, because I think eventually Juju Brents is going to work his way in there. I mean, you heard Chris Ballard talk about him in pretty glowing terms for a guy that didn't get a lot of time this offseason. Maybe not as glowing as Jalen Jones, but still glowing terms for Juju Brents. I think he's going to earn a spot. I don't think it's going to be anything Flowers or Baker does wrong. I think it's going to be Juju Brents getting comfortable, getting healthy, which is a huge part of this as well. And then, forcing his way onto the field.
I'm with you. I think that we will have a starter change, and I will think it's Juju Brents for sure, kind of getting on the field and earn that starting spot. Because in large part, even though Flowers and Baker are starters now, I still envision this defense, George, rotating a lot of young players. Like, it's not like one of those where those two are starting, they're never coming off the field. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Brents. Jones, you mentioned as well, has been kind of the training camp MVP, if you will, or one of the bright spots coming out of training camp that Chris Ballard especially loves to rave about. I think he'll get playing time as well. So it's one of those where you'll see a lot of opportunities for a lot of young guys. And I do think one of them will grab it and run with it. So even though none of the younger guys or rookies, at least starting week number 1, I do think that will change here by week 18. Let's go from the defensive back unit to the defensive line unit, George. Colts, it's been since 2019. They've had a defensive lineman register 10 plus sacks. That was just in Houston, TBT. This year, with that streak end, George, I will say, well, let's name a player. Kwity Paye. Is this a breakout year coming for Kwity Paye? Well, he will have at least 10 sacks.
I can't be confident in that one just because Quity's injury history. It makes me, leery here. We see him get pressure. We know that he's going to have hurries. He's going to speed up the clock for the opposing quarterback. I think those are things that are very helpful to a defense. But I just don't know, is he going to play every week? If he plays every week, yes, he'll get 10 sacks this year. But history tells me that's not going to happen. And I think it's going to be another year where the streak lives on, where there is nobody with 10 sacks. It feels like another year where Buckner's the leading sack guy with maybe 8.5 or 9.
Just gonna say that feels like every year now. Your interior defensive lineman is the one with the leading the sacks. Not great. Now that's no knock on Buck. But that's not great when, again, your defensive tackle is the one leading sacks every year. I'm going to say yes. I think this is a big year for Kwity. I'm really excited for him. I know the injury history is a concern, obviously. But I'm with you. If he's able to stay on the field and be healthy, even for 15 out of 17 games, I think he'll get that double-digit number. I think a big kind of year 3 breakout is coming for Kwity. I think this is a year. This year is going to break out, really solidify himself and have the Colts feel good. At least going to 2024, they got one edge rusher solved and feel pretty good about him going into next year.
I do have to mention, because it's my duty, that Grover Stewart wants to play on third down this year. So we have to throw Grover in. If he plays on third down, maybe he's a 10-sack guy. We'll have to see how that goes.
We get 5 for Grover, George.
That'll be huge. That will be huge.
Get number 90 ready to go into the Ring of Honor. Put him up there. You know what? Props to you, George. It's been, 45 minutes on this preview pod? That's the first time you brought up Grover Stewart. Thank you for doing so. The biggest Grover Stewart stan lives on for 2023.
You knew it was coming.
That's true.
Grover Stewart is going to get mentioned every week on this podcast.
All right, so if Grover Stewart's playing third downs, maybe getting more sacks, maybe that takes away a few tackle opportunities for Shaq Leonard. Well, we set the number at 100 tackles, George, for Shaq. How are we feeling about that?
I think so. I mean, you look at this defense and the way it's set up. Zaire Franklin, obviously last year set the record, single season record. Now, some of that was turnovers helped in that too, because the defense is out there a lot more often. There were a lot more possessions for the other offense. So I'm sure he wouldn't mind if he has a few less tackles this year. But I can't remember, it just seems like year in and year out. It was Shaq and Bobby Okereke who had 100 tackles. I think it's going to be Zaire and Shaq again this year. It seems the way this defense is set up, there's going to be 2 linebackers get 100 tackles. Again, like with Kwity, though, health is the big question. If he misses too many weeks, then, obviously that won't take place, but I feel good about where he's at. I think the coaches have been really positive about the growth that he made throughout the preseason. We'll see. It sounds like he's progressing through the concussion protocol. I think he's still got a clear independent neurologist. There's always another step, the way this goes. But we saw him in practice go from red jersey to no red jersey, so that we know he's moving forward. Yeah, I think he gets 100 tackles this year.
I'm with you because we've never seen Shaq not be the maniac when he's on the field. I know, again, last year, I would say a little bit different, but his spirits this year compared to last year seemed like they were in a totally different place. And it feels like he was almost trying to will himself back and try to like sell himself that I'm back last year. And obviously we saw, unfortunately, because injuries and otherwise, that he was never able to get back to that form. But this feels legit this year. Like, it's not, to me at least, does not feel like hype where he's trying to sell you that he's back when he's truly not, George. Like, you have practiced a lot when he's been out there. Like, it feels like he's looking back to his 2021 form than even he was last year.
No, absolutely. Is he there yet? No, there's still work to be done, obviously, but he did everything surrounding him is so much more positive. The talk from his teammates, the talk from the coaches, but most importantly, the talk from himself. I think that black cloud that was kind of following him around has dissipated finally, and he feels more confident in where he's at, and that usually is not good news for opposing offenses.
The maniac, George, seems to be back, which if that's the case, he's going to gobble up tackles. I'm with you. The 100's an easy number. Easy number if the maniac is back of the field, which it looks like he will be. Like I said, fingers crossed he's able to pass the concussion protocol. Seems like George is progressing well where he should be on the field week 1. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, with concussion, it's always a fluid situation, but right now everything is trending in the right direction. In that cliche phrase that we're going to hear a billion times between now and January.
That's true. Yeah, get the cliches ready. Shane Second is not someone who gives you any sort of heartfelt answer or truthful answer even when it comes to most things about his team. All right, George, 9 questions down. This is the biggest one. We saved the biggest question for last year because this is truly going to determine how we look at 2023. When the season ends at home against Houston, how will we be talking about Anthony Richardson after the 2023 season?
I honestly think very similar to the way we are now, that there's a ton of potential and that, we haven't seen the ceiling yet. And I think that it'll be a good thing. I think there'll be more confidence that he's going to work out, but I think it's going to be a year. We keep trying to prepare for that. I think it's going to be a year of trials and tribulations. You're going to have a lot of adversity, throughout this season, but I think he's going to make more than enough plays that people feel like he was the right choice and that he's the guy moving forward. It's just going to be, there's also going to be those moments, those head scratching kind of moments where, why did he do that? What do you see on that throw? I anticipate asking that question to him a few times, in post games. What did you see on the interception? But that's a natural order of things. But I've said this from the get-go, and I still feel that way. The longer you're around the guy, the maturity is off the charts. We know the athleticism. There's not any person who pays any attention to the NFL doesn't understand that he's an athletic freak. The work ethic has been outstanding. The character is elite. You put all those things together, it's hard to see him failing. I just don't see how that guy eventually doesn't hit. Now, how long does it take? That's what we're going to see. That's how this process plays out. But all those elements that he has, I think at the end of the year, we're going to be talking in positive tones about Anthony Richardson.
I think we will see basically the Eagles preseason finale game extrapolated throughout the entire season. Meaning, like I said, we're going to see some ups, some nice plays, some good scrambles, some good throws, some exciting plays happen. We're going to see some bad decision-making, also bad play from the rest of the team as well. I think he can make a good play, have it called back because of an offensive line, hold, or a receiver drops the ball. Like, it's not like obviously the team around him is going to be perfect either. We will see some ups and downs, but at the end of the season, just kind of like at the end of the Eagles game, I think we'll see the reason why the Colts took a chance on him. And you could start to see, like I said, formulate and start to crystallize, oh, yeah, this guy's a chance to be the true franchise quarterback. I don't think we'll be saying that after year number 1. But I think we'll definitely clearly see why the Colts took a chance on him and the potential going forward here. I think it's going to be, I think we're going to see a little bit more good than bad and a little bit more reason for optimism going into 2024. Hey, if we get the right pieces around him and he continues his trajectory, this could be a top 10 quarterback in the league in a few years. I think that's where, that to me, George, if we are both right, where, again, it's going to be a roller coaster. There's going to be plenty of bad moments and head-scratching moments, and when you want to rip your hair out, and say, what the hell are you doing? Also going to be a lot of good moments where it's like, how did he make that play? But if at the end of the year, more good than bad is accumulated, and you at least see growth. That's it also, too. You see growth at the end where he's learning from maybe early season mistakes and not repeating those again. Saw it in the Buffalo game where he had that one interception on the first drive. How do you respond to better drives and not really, for the most part, putting the ball in harm's way on either drive? He's able to grow and learn as he has so far, and will feel optimistic and hopeful that this team is on the right trajectory going forward and they found their guy, unlike really the last 4 off seasons, where we've been sitting there after the season going, oh boy, another quarterback change. Maybe outside of Philip Rivers, maybe he's a little unfair, but I know he's a little older, so that kind of puts questions there. But otherwise, it's like, oh boy, we need a new QB, George. That streak of 4 years in a row, 4 off seasons in a row should come to an end.
Hopefully. If it doesn't, there's a really big problem. If there's another new starter next year in week 1, then your prediction that this is not going to be a depressing pod will have gone very, very, very poorly.
The only thing I'll say about that is that if we are talking about a new starter in 2024, that most likely will mean Caleb Williams. I mean, right now, I don't think there's going to be another quarterback in the draft where the Colts are that bad that they would ditch Anthony Richardson. Like, I don't think they'll ditch Richardson for Drake May or Michael Penix Jr. If it's Caleb Williams, the next Patrick Mahomes, the reigning Heisman winner, maybe back-to-back Heisman winner, could be a different tone in the pod, but yes, I think it's very safe to say this is that after week 18 ends, we will not be looking at even after week 16 ends, we were kind of doing last year. I don't think we'll be looking at college football scouting and turn into a college football podcast.
Well, if it's Marvin Harrison, I think that's the only thing. We may be a Marvin Harrison Jr. podcast,
which is fine. That I am more than okay with that. I am more than okay with that. Bring the family circle, or I guess bring the family tree full circle. That would be great, George. That would be tremendous.
I think we're the first Colts-related podcast to mention Marvin Harrison Jr. too. You never hear his name.
Never.
Little known secret out there.
No one really knows his dad. Pretty nondescript career. Didn't really do too much.
Really under the radar guy.
Yeah. So
how tall is his mom? Because he is much taller than his dad.
You're right. That's a good question. Genetics, man. Must have skipped Marvin Sr.'s time.
Yeah, that's what the first time I saw him, I was talking, wait a minute, that's Marvin Harrison Jr.? I was expecting T.Y. Hilton. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. It does not make sense. But he's genetically hit all the boxes, and part of the reason why that teams could be tanking for a receiver for the first time in a long time.
Dude, Arizona's got a chance to get both of them. I mean,
Stupid
don't forget
Houston.
they got their pick and Houston's pick. So Arizona's got a chance to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll see how that plays out for him.
Hopefully, selfishly for us, not. At least Marvin Harrison Jr. is left for the Colts if they're close enough. But, I mean, stupid. I still don't understand how you can sell me on Will Anderson Jr. being worth giving up what could be the first overall pick next year or bare minimum second overall pick. I'd rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. for CJ Stroud than Will Anderson.
Here's a big question 11 for you. What will Jim Irsay give up to trade up to get Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Oh, boy. What wouldn't he do? I'm trying to think. Jim would not. Okay, he would not give up, sell the team, obviously.
Right.
Would he give up? Trying to see, would an owner want a few guitars? I mean, draft picks, I think he'd do whatever it takes. Would he give the whole draft? Would he do the Saints Ricky Williams thing? I would not be shocked.
Would he swear off Twitter? That
might be a breaking point for him. The Colts ownership and the ownership of his Twitter handle, I think probably are two things off limits.
Those are the two who can't touch in the Marvin Harrison deal. The rest, everything else is on the table, but those two are I can see that.
Oh boy. Yeah. I can see that too. The one thing he loves more than this team is the alumni. And so to get an alumni son on the team, George, yeah, I think it's safe to say he'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's why we're going to be a Marvin Harrison Jr. pod right there.
And you know what's up with George? I will say, as a Penn State fan here, if Ohio State does not want to throw him the ball, kind of keep him fresh and just kind of have Marvin Harrison Jr. decoy this year, no problem with it. I mean, 2 catches against Indiana. Right? What are we doing? Sheesh. I'll take it.
What does Harrison have to do for a stock to actually be lowered, though? The year that he had last year and his genetics and his size, is there anything that could actually happen outside of injury that could actually make him less enticing to NFL teams come April?
I guess if he quits.
Or Brad,
he says, screw you, Ryan Day and Kyle McCord. You got to throw me the ball. I'm out of here. And like week 8 leaves. I don't think so.
You don't think even then he's probably still going high because outside of arrest or injury, and depending on arrest, Jalen Carter show you there's levels of that too. So, I just can't imagine. There's no red flag right now with this kid.
No, and hopefully that stays that way. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that stays that way. But yeah, it's a good question. I honestly got nothing outside of a receiver bursting onto the scene and having like an unbelievable historical year. There's nothing Marvin Harrison Jr. himself could do to lower his stock any bit whatsoever. But hey, they're 4-12 or 4-13, George. You're right in the mix. You're right in the mix.
Yep. That's why we're a Marvin Harrison pod. I mean, this is why. This is the goal for 2020. Keep Anthony Richardson healthy, let him grow, and draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Those are the goals for 2023.
Let's go. Let's go. That is what we're looking for and heading into 2023. So that is our 2023 season preview Colts podcast right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod. We are here in season now, Sunday nights after the game, Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Blue Horseshoe Pod, bright blue logo. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod. George, I'm very excited. We actually have a game to preview. We'll do so on Thursday behind enemy lines. This is a great time to be alive. This is a truly great time to be alive. Football is back, and now we can get the speculation is over. The questions are over. We could finally see what AR in this offense is going to be like. Let's go.
And, well, we still can't talk scheme, but we can see scheme. So, yeah, there's that.
That's true. We could see it finally. We could see what this offense is actually going to look like for the first time under Shane Steichen. A lot of exciting times ahead here. So we will get you jacked up for Sunday's game on Thursday's pod. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm still not in. It's still preseason for me.
You're jacked up.
That was embarrassing. I know. I'm jacked up. I'm too excited. I'm so excited. I lost control of my body. That's it.
Sold out Lucas Oil Stadium. Place is going to be rocking on Sunday. It's game week, man.
Game week. Let's go. Get fired up. Enjoy it. We'll talk to you on Thursday on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.